at a local level or but you're not.
One of the things that it's important to understand about groups is that every individual comes into a group with his own unique goals and motivations. Think of the meetings you've attended. Haven't you often been surprised that not all the members felt the way you did about the meetings? And look what's happening here. The most casual glance confirms that some members seem strongly enough to make their points quite firmly.
Mr. Chairman, really, do you know that so far this evening there's been only one point of view expressed, and it certainly hasn't been mine. You just haven't let me get in at all, and I have a large amount of information here that's very, very important.
What we see happening here, and keep it in mind that it happens in all groups, is 8 people responding 8 different ways to the same situation. A person's total experience, his beliefs, his convictions, all of the many factors that make a person behave the way he does influence his participation with others. Whether it's a meeting like this to discuss national affairs or a business meeting or any experience with other people, a person is motivated and influenced by a number of forces. And once we've recognized individual motivation, we've come pretty close to understanding an important aspect of organizational life.
The dynamics of leadership, presented in association with Boston University with the assistance of a grant from the Sears Roebuck Foundation. Host for the series of 10 programs is Malcolm Knowles, Associate Professor of Education and General Education at Boston University.
I'm sure that you must have had the experience of being in a meeting where somebody stuck to a pet idea long after everybody else had rejected it. And as you sat there, didn't it occur to you that if it weren't for this member's unreasonable behavior, the group could get its business done much faster? How often have you wished you could just put such a person in his place and shut him up? Well, in this program, we're going to be concerned with how you can deal constructively with problems of this kind. In trying to understand the behavior of people in groups, we start with one central fact. Individuals join groups and organizations in order to satisfy their own personal needs and achieve their own personal goals. For example, let's see what we can find out about the needs and goals of the members of this group. Member 3, we saw you doodling a while ago. Does this mean you haven't been interested in what's going on?
Excuse me. It's not that I'm not interested. It's just that I'm tired. I've been up all night long. My daughter's been sick. She had an asthma attack last night. I've had a tough day at the office, and I'm just bushed. I've been doodling just to stay awake.
Mm-hmm. Well, we see at work here one example of what we might call physical needs that affect the behavior of every person at one time or another. People who are too tired start nodding off or become irritable. Symptoms of other physical needs, such as hunger, thirst, and discomfort, cause people to squirm in their chairs and to become impatient for the meeting to end. Let's go on to another reaction. I thought member 4 seemed quite upset a moment ago. Maybe it was my imagination, but let's ask her. Member 4, were you really upset a while ago?
Upset? Indeed, I was upset. Why, do you know that for about 15 minutes I have been trying to get a word in edgewise, but our chairman absolutely wouldn't let me get a word in at all. He just ignored me. And you know what happened? My blood pressure started to go up and up and up until finally I exploded. But I did feel better afterwards.
Member 4's reaction suggests another category of needs that all people have in varying degrees at various times. We might call these psychological needs. One of the strongest of these is the one that member 4 demonstrated, the need for recognition, respect, status, the acknowledgement of personal worth. Another psychological need that no doubt is represented in this group is the need for security or confidence, the need to know what is expected of me in this situation, and the assurance that I'll be able to come up to these expectations. A third psychological need is that of affection or belongingness, the need to be liked, to be accepted as a member of the group. Another need is probably for some new experience or adventure, the need to escape from boredom. Let's test another observation. I thought that Member 7 seemed quite impatient as we opened. Is this true, Member 7?
Very frankly, I was thinking about what I would say to my wife tonight when I get home and tell her how we had frittered away our time again.
This is a good example of a type of force that work in all of us. The associational forces, we might call them. All of us come into every group carrying with us our associations with other people and groups. For Member 7, it was his wife in this case. In other cases, it might be our family, our church, occupational associates, political parties, social class. In every meeting, these hidden committees are figuratively watching over our shoulders and making demands on us to behave this way or that. Now let's talk to some other members of this group and see if we can discover other types of forces that are affecting their behavior. Member 6, you haven't been participating very much, but when you have, you've indicated that there was something between you and Member 4. Do you recall what it was you said?
Well, yes. I said I didn't feel the need to say anything because Number 4 expressed my ideas so very well. I just didn't see any need.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is an example of another type of force influencing all of us that might be called emotional tendencies. One such emotional tendency that Member 4 demonstrated at the beginning was the tendency of fight. Some people sometimes to react aggressively to difficult situations. Another is the tendency toward flight, the tendency of other people to draw into their own shells in difficult situations. Member 7 probably illustrated this rather well in the beginning. Another emotional tendency is pairing, the tendency probably demonstrated by Member 6 to find an ally, here Member 4, to team up with. And still another is dependency, the tendency of still other people to go along with what the leader wants or the majority. Now I'd like to ask Member 8 why we haven't heard anything from her yet. Member 8, can you explain this?
Well, I've just always been sort of quiet in groups, I guess. I come from a family where girls were supposed to have been seen and not heard. I have 5 older brothers, but I'm a good listener.
Well, this statement provides us with an illustration of the final type of force we'll attempt to describe in this program, the force of past experiences. As Member 8 has demonstrated, each of us enters into a group with a background of experiences with other groups. Our childhood family, our play groups, school groups, church groups, and others. Each of these experiences tends to leave an imprint on us which flavors our attitudes toward ourselves as members of groups and our attitudes toward groups in general. For example, Member 8's experience as the youngest child and only girl in a family group has tended to condition her to take a submissive role in all groups. Another friend of mine recently joined a new group and was quite hurt because they didn't ask her to serve as secretary. Almost every group she'd ever belonged to had asked her to be secretary. These past experiences are similar in some ways to associational forces, which we talked about before, except they're carryovers from the past and may have no real relevance to the present. No doubt there are many other forces influencing our behavior in organizations, but perhaps these half dozen that we've sketched out briefly illustrate the main point that we're trying to get at, namely that every act of human behavior is the result of a complex of causes. It would be false, of course, to assume that we're driven blindly by these forces which are trying to push us in various directions. Each of us selects which needs to meet and which needs to suppress or postpone at a given moment, either consciously or unconsciously. Furthermore, our behavior is strongly influenced by another set of forces that tend to pull us rather than push us, namely our goals. For example, there are 8 people in this discussion group. I dare say that if we asked these people why they joined this group, we'd get general agreement that it was to discuss the major issues that face America. But if we could get underneath this surface reason and ask these people what they are really here for, I'd bet we'd get 8 different answers. Let's find out. Number 1, what are you really here for, do you think? What would you really like to get out of this experience?
Well, I guess my real reason for being here is to make friends.
Number 2, how about you?
Well, I really want to get some ideas about how to make America a better place in which to live.
And 3?
Well, as tired as I am, I certainly didn't come here to waste my time. I came here to stimulate my mind, and hopefully even to stretch my mind.
4?
Well, I like all those ideas. I agree with them. But I think my main purpose in coming here is that I would like a discussion group like this to help people get a little more actively involved in the whole process of thinking about how we can make this a better, a safer, and fit world to live in. I think that citizens have to stop being so passive.
5?
Well, I guess I don't know what my goal is yet, but give me time.
You need more time.
You know?
6?
Well, as I said before, I feel that member 4 more or less speaks for me.
7?
Well, I just don't know yet.
All right. 8?
Very frankly, I'm here primarily because I like to be with people.
You like to be with people. It's clear that the members of this group come into it with a variety of personal goals, and I dare say that there are many more left unstated. And yet they're bound together by an overall purpose. The question every person must decide, of course, is what is he going to do about the various forces that are influencing the behavior of his fellow members? So long as these forces remain within fairly normal bounds, we tend to ignore them. But once they start to become too strong, we tend to react to them negatively and to regard the person in whom they're operating as being a problem member, in quotes. In my experience in conducting leadership training workshops, this issue recurs over and over again. What to do about the problem member? What the leaders mean by this specifically is, how do we deal with Charlie Jones? He always seems to be against everything. How do we deal with Susie Brown? She keeps wandering off the track. Or with John Doe, who wants to dominate the discussion all the time. They tell me meetings drag on because these problem members interfere and block, and everybody gets on edge. The solution to this problem is quite simple to say, but sometimes very difficult to accomplish. It has to do with getting along with people in life anywhere. The key to the solution is tolerance, or even better, understanding and respect. Let's illustrate this point. We'll ask our demonstration group to continue its discussion on unemployment, but this time we've arranged for member 7 to display a certain irritating personality quirk. And as this discussion continues, you'll be let in on some of the inner feelings of this problem member that affect his behavior, and you'll hear from other members regarding what they think about him. While this is going on, you in the viewing audience might observe in what different ways member 7 reacts to each of the other members of the group.
What we feel, what we think, and what we know about the subject, and contribute to our overall understanding of this, and see if we can get somewhere. Member 1?
Well, I definitely feel that unemployment is a basic human problem.
Yes, indeed.
And that it's not right, it's not fair for an individual who wants to work not to be able to find a job, not to be able to contribute to society, and that I personally feel that government is the best agency to do some adjustment and some help in this area.
Yes. Member 2.
Well, I'm not really very worried about the unemployment of younger people. Younger people always seem to be able to get jobs one way or another. But what really bothers me is the older person. It's next to impossible for a person between the ages, say, of 45 and 50 to get a job if he or she becomes unemployed.
Well, this is a problem, of course, but experience is a factor.
Well, I was looking at a television program just the other evening in which this whole problem was discussed. And one of the things that was brought out was the need for retraining of these older people. So I think this is a very important problem.
I'm happy to hear my friend here mention retraining. It relates to education, because I disagree with having to rely on the government for everything. I mean, if we're going to attack this unemployment problem in the space age, We've got to do something about improving the re-education, the retraining of these unemployed people. How many people do you know that have had a good education are out of work now?
Yes, member 4.
Well, I don't want you to think I don't consider unemployment a very crucial problem in our society, but I don't think it's the most crucial problem. It seems to me that there are areas that need more of our money and energy and attention. For example, underdeveloped countries. I think this is more pressing than our unemployment picture
Problems
right now.
never come singly, do they?
That's true.
But I think that one way to shatter this unemployment problem is to shorten the work week and spread out the employment over many more people.
That's a very
All right?
debatable point.
Well, it's an idea. Member 6.
What about unemployment compensation for heads of families? I know very little about it, but it seems to me that the rate for them should be much higher than it is for single people. I don't know how family heads exist now.
Yes, that's a fact. Member 7?
Man, where have you been? You're talking about reducing the work week. This only contributes to the problem. As a matter of fact, we're talking about things we do not know anything about. It's chatter like this that contribits to the... Didn't you ask me to make a statement?
Yes, I did.
It's chatter like this that contributes to part of the problem.
And we still have...
We're talking about things...
We still have to hear from
Can I make my statement?
Yes, go ahead.
It's chatter like this that's contributing to the problem. We don't have the facts. You're talking about things that you don't know anything
Let's
about.
not get hot on the cuff.
Yes, and I haven't heard anybody talk about stimulating business and lowering taxes so that we can solve this problem.
All right.
We're jumping to conclusions that
How about
aren't justified.
Yes, why can't we come to that? Member 8.
Well, I don't care who you call on, but I think we ought to get at some of the facts.
Member
Yes,
8,
and
please.
I for one want to hear the facts as Seven knows them, so please let me have a chance.
May we hear from member 8 first, though?
I certainly do believe in liberalizing unemployment benefits. I'd go on relief tomorrow if I could. After all, I've paid into it.
Oh, but that's only part of it.
Unemployment compensation. Here we go again. Unemployment compensation, reduce the work week, government.
Well, that's
something to
somebody
be said for unemployment.
Why don't you get out of your ivory tower? You don't know what you're talking about. You've got...
You got it, Dixie, 5 miles an hour.
There are more jobs. There are more jobs than there are people. Have you read the water ads?
All right, now, just a moment.
I haven't heard you.
Now, just a moment.
You haven't talked to unemployment. Who's going to...
Poor old Seven. He's really had a tough day. Nobody's going to change his mind, and perhaps we'd better not try. I guess what he really needs is to push someone around. Well, I'm willing to be the goat if it'll make him feel better.
If you want to preserve the free enterprise system...
We're for the free enterprise system.
Yes, but why talk about unemployment in these days?
Well, these are all parts of the problem, and I think member 7 has experience to render.
Thank you.
Just keep out of this chair.
Heavens. Member 7 seems pretty worked up. Maybe this subject is too close to home for him. But on the other hand, he probably does know more about this subject than anybody else here. I wonder how we could get him to talk about things he does know about without getting him any more angry.
Let's talk about employment with facts at our hand.
Your company...
That's not only your point of view, but it's other businesses.
I don't know what the...
All right, now, hold it, now, hold it.
You're
We've
talking
got
to
now-
a lady here that you never got beyond the...
But you're killing the goose that lays the golden egg.
Every time I hear big business talk, I get sick. There's far too much emphasis on profit. All these fellows think about is making money.
Without ever
Well, he's not accusing anybody of anything at this point. No.
What facts? You haven't done any research on this.
But he
You're
has.
going off the deep
Your
end.
job was handed to you. You know it was.
I just can't stand people who push others around in meetings like this. I'll show him he can't push me around.
We don't have to agree with 7.
Well, it sounds like you're agreeing. You three are ganging up on us.
It broadens the problem as far as we're concerned
I'm all
here.
for letting 7
It broadens
say what
our
he has
area
to
of
say and
discussion.
what
I
he
mean,
doesn't.
we're wasting our time if we have to listen to talk like that.
Well, he will listen. He will
My first reaction to number 7 is that he just doesn't belong here. But I better control this reaction. Getting mad isn't going to be any help at all.
We have more jobs.
This is another dimension of this whole problem.
You have fulfilled.
You have laid off...
We're looking for jobs.
All right.
The businessmen today
the young person.
have the jobs that the people will work.
You have laid off people for automation, but what have you done to
Because
retrain
they
them?
don't want to work.
No, but they would like another job if you would help them.
No, I think,
But
I
we're
think,
going
that-
at this
I
the
think
wrong
we have to
way.
listen to this.
Number 7 strikes me as a husband that takes out his frustrations on his wife and family. Why these people can't leave their bad temper and their business problems at work is something that gets me. His wife might have to live with it, but we don't.
Yeah, well, I think you ought to attend an ivory tower once in a while, and then you'd know the facts.
And now we have a great many little areas which to talk about, and now hold it. He's not attacking anybody.
Well, the way he was talking to this lady...
Boy, this man sounds just like my boss. Absolutely no feeling for other people. He wants to run everything his way. Well, he's ruined this meeting. I don't know how the other members feel, but I'm not going to listen to my boss all day and then hear it all again at night.
Well, I understand you're supposed to cheer this, but you gang up with him, that's not cheering the
I'm
meeting.
not agreeing with him. I'm simply saying that he
Well,
has the
what
right
are you trying to do then?
He has the right to express his opinion.
What point are you trying to make
I
then?
know, well, now you calm down too, young lady. You calm down too.
What is wrong with me? I've been in arguments all day. First, the accountant showed up some short accounts. I don't know how they got that way. Then it was that stupid sales manager that tried to blame the inventory discrepancies on me. Then to top it off, losing the election at Rotary Club this afternoon. I guess this just isn't my day.
Jobs are going a-begging.
So that you say that the unemployment picture, well, what's your fault?
What's your kind of
Too many
specialized?
people don't want to work.
Number 7, the kind of specialized
What do you mean they don't want to work?
Did you notice how differently Member 7's behavior affected the different members of the group? Member 2 seemed quite irritated by him, as did members 3, 6, and 8. On the other hand, members 4 and 5 seemed to be sensitive to the fact that something had happened to member 7 outside the group to upset him. And they seemed willing to give him support and some of the understanding that he needed. Member 1 was sort of torn between his own feeling of irritation and his sense of duty to be kind to others, but the latter impulse finally won out. But even more importantly, did you notice how differently member 7 responded to the reactions of the different members to him? It seemed to me that the statements he made following comments by members 1, 4, and 5 seemed to become increasingly constructive and reasonable, whereas after the less tolerant members had spoken, he seemed to become more aggressive and angry and dogmatic. Now, what does this little experiment tell us about the problem member? It suggests that whether or not a member becomes a problem to a group depends to a large extent on how a group treats him. This idea can be stated as a simple principle. Namely, every member enters a group with certain needs which he'll seek to satisfy in the group. The extent to which the group helps him to satisfy these needs will largely determine the extent to which he feels free to contribute his resources to the group. Or to put it another way, the more frustrated a member feels in a group, the less able will he be able to contribute constructively to the group. Now, this is not to deny that there may be occasions when a member has such strong needs or such serious personality difficulties that the group is simply unable to cope with them. But it does imply that those groups that establish a climate of understanding and acceptance toward the personal needs of their members will probably have fewer problem members than those groups which ignore or reject the feelings of the members. I wonder if you agree with me that our demonstration group still has some distance to go in meeting the needs of its members and tapping their resources so as to produce a satisfying result in their discussion. Let's see if we can help them out. Member 5, as chairman of this discussion group, I wonder how you feel about the way the discussion's going.
Well, it's occurred to me that we don't know enough about the subject area. It's a
I
broad
agree,
one, you know.
indeed.
Does everybody agree that there aren't enough facts out here, as Member 7 is saying? Do you have any ideas about what you might do?
Yeah, I do. Do you mind, excuse me?
Yes.
Look, I think this might be a good idea. Since I know very little about most of the topics that were discussed, in fact, I really only know about the subject that I was interested in. What about this? Supposing I volunteer before the next meeting to look into one of your subjects, for example, 2. I know very little about this problem of aged people. What do you call it technically? Geriatrics? Yeah. Well, I know nothing really about geriatrics, but now I'm interested. So I'd like to do a little research on my own and bring in the information next time.
Well, good idea. Do we want to pick this up?
Yeah. I'd be very glad to lend you. Good. I'll be down to pick them up.
Wonderful.
And
Good.
I could do something about bills on
Good.
unemployment.
Yes, very good idea.
I should have something on government.
Something a little more stimulating than what we had tonight, I would say.
Yes,
I'm
number one.
interested very much in learning something about business. In my religious field, I don't get much opportunity. I wondered, do you have anything I could
Yes,
look into?
indeed. I have several studies I would be glad to give you. They're studies conducted by the National Chamber of Commerce on our economy and employment. We have some splendid studies conducted by the Committee on Economic Development, which I think would contribute a lot to thinking about.
That should be helpful to you, one, because you do work with businessmen
This
in
is
church.
a, excuse me, I'm sorry, this is a two-way street. In other words, I have some books back at the office on personal...
What a difference in spirit
and I think you ought
this group has now. Obviously, every member is feeling more secure about his ability to contribute to the group. By involving all of them in planning for the next meeting, we've no doubt helped each member to gain a sense of personal worth and a feeling of belonging. Let's review briefly what we've learned from observing our demonstration group in this program. Certainly, the central lesson is that every individual enters a group with a variety of forces influencing his behavior. We've probably also learned that it just doesn't do any good to blame a person for having personal needs. These are givens, just as being short or tall is a given. We've seen that these needs often produce certain symptoms in behavior. For instance, the person whose need for security is not being satisfied might show symptoms anywhere along the line from the extreme of total withdrawal on the one hand to the other extreme of trying to take over control of the group so as to make it do what he feels secure about doing on the other. We've probably also demonstrated that it's not necessary for one person to know what the other person's actual needs are. In fact, any attempt at such a diagnosis will probably result in the other person's feeling judged and rejected and becoming a problem member. It's sufficient that each person merely be sensitive to the fact that other people have needs that are different from his own, and that through mutual understanding and acceptance, they can help one another achieve mutual goals. From the point of view of increasing effectiveness of groups, the chief lesson of this program is probably to point up the importance of establishing a climate in every group which makes every member feel respected, confident about what is expected of him, and useful. For those of you who are leaders of busy organizations, perhaps the single most important thing to remember is this. If you allow yourself to get so immersed in getting things done that you lose sight of the needs of the people who have to do them, you'll end up with a lot of problem members. In the next program, we're going to inquire further into what makes an effective group and examine some of the ways you can diagnose what's wrong when a group's not working effectively. We hope you can be with us then.
Dr. Knowles is Associate Professor of Education and General Consultant in Adult Education at Boston University. This program has been produced by WGBH-TV in association with Boston University with the assistance of a grant from the Sears Roebuck Foundation. National Educational Television. In association with Boston University with the assistance of a grant from the Sears Roebuck Foundation.